Hi Tristan, thanks for joining me today. Wanted to have a chat with you because we've noticed an explosion recently in people deploying SD-WAN and wanted to get your opinion as to why you think that is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of factors driving this really, and it depends on the organization, but I think the key thing that we're seeing is sort of a change in how people work, and particularly how we're using offices now. So this was obviously driven by COVID, where nobody really had a choice but to work from home. So we've all seen that it's possible to be a remote worker, which has really thrown up the question of how we use offices now. Because if you don't necessarily have to have an office, then why would you spend loads of money putting infrastructure into one? So that's part of what's driving this, and we're seeing a lot of branch offices opening up that perhaps are just a couple users, say out in Asia or America, as companies look to expand, which perhaps don't need a full leased line themselves. Or there's a different variety of things. It really depends on the business, but it's mainly driven by remote workers.
Okay. With regards to remote users, can you tell us a bit more about how that situation is affecting connectivity, for instance?
Yeah, so I mean, there was a lot of sticking plaster solutions that we saw people putting out there during lockdowns, which they got us through them, and that's great. But I think everyone's now looking back and sort of evaluating and going, this is really the best way for us to be doing this. I think the resounding answer is no. So what we need to now do is look at how are you managing the connectivity, right? And that's sort of where SD-WAN comes in. And I think a good metaphor for this that I've always liked is SD-WAN is effectively like Google Maps, right? Previously, if you think about a cabbie in London, right, they had to know all of the London streets off the back of their hands, and only they knew that, and it was very specialized knowledge. Now, anyone with Google Maps can become a taxi driver, and Google Maps will route you along the most efficient route to get to that location. Now, where Cult comes in is, we're the quality of the roads, but SD-WAN is essentially just a management system which provides the best possible route to connect to where you need to connect to, and that's the main thing that we're sort of seeing driving the deployment of this.
What are you finding that remote users are typically trying to access?
And then that's the other bit. What are they trying to access? It's different for most people, but if we think about a lot of stuff's moving into the cloud now, and maybe if we look at, say, Office 365, that's just you just access that via the internet. But maybe you've got some more dedicated cloud space, AWS or Azure. Maybe you have a direct connection that goes there, like an express route or AWS Direct Connect kind of thing. Or maybe, a lot of businesses that we see actually still have, they manage their own servers in sort of co-location environments. So then the user needs to connect to a DC, and how are they doing that? So when people are in lockdowns, they're using VPNs, and then they'd VPN into the office, and then they go through the firewall there, and then they break out to the internet and say, go access the Office 365. Because the alternative is using an unsecured broadband connection to connect to where they need to, and that's risky, right? So, but then what happens is that they route to the office and then back out to the internet, but then it wants to route straight back to their home, skipping out the office, which causes what's called hairpinning, and then the VPN drops, and that caused a whole load of other issues. Now, we're seeing people have to sort of quite radically redesign how the networks look, because what you effectively need to do, instead of having sort of the old castle and moat infrastructure, as they called it, from the office, where it had a firewall, there was the moat, and a big internet pipe that came out from there, well, now all of your users need to have that on them, on their device, so that no matter where they are, they're able to do that. So if they need to connect into the WAN, which gives them access to, say, an Azure Express route to access resources there, or to go to a data center to be able to get some files stored in a server there, then they can remote access into the WAN. Now that's one version, but then you've also got secure web gateways which allow people to break out at the source securely, so it's like they've got a firewall on them, and they can just break out directly to Office 365. They don't need to go into the WAN and then break out from the internet and then go over to Office 365. So, it enables a much more flexible working practice. And again, this is, what we're seeing is a lot of companies have sort of smaller branch offices, maybe internationally, maybe even just across, nationally. You might have your head office in London, and then you might have some, 5-10 man teams out in Bath and Edinburgh, or maybe they're in New York and Tokyo. It doesn't really matter, right? Because Colt's got this network that goes all across all of this. So whilst you're traversing the public internet, in a sense, it's not the public internet, it's a secure private internet, effectively, for your business that has this global network that goes around the world. So whether they're in Tokyo or they're in Edinburgh, they can join onto this internet. You don't have to have MPLS, although there's still use cases for that, depending on latency, and if you need to use stuff like Citrix. And we see a lot of people have their Citrix environments based in London, but then a user out in Singapore needs to connect to that. So that's a use case where MPLS is quite useful still. But overall, Colt, the internet circuits are actually built on the same network as the MPLS network. So you're essentially getting MPLS grade internet services, which is one of the nice bits about how we deploy our SD-WAN. So then you add the SASE connection onto that. Effectively, there's an encrypted as standard. It's two-factor authentication, essentially zero trust light, if you will. So you're enabling that really high level of security to connect back into your WAN with this underlaying the roads. If you think back to the Google Maps sort of metaphor, Colt is the roads, and then SD-WAN is the navigation system that helps you just take the fastest possible route, and we're supplying the roads the whole way there to get the users to where they need to be.
Okay, Tristan, there's a lot of good information there, thank you, but I think we're only just scratching the surface. What can people do to find out more?
Well, reach out to us at any point, we're always here. And I think we'll look to discuss a lot of these complicated elements of security and sort of hybrid cloud, on-prem, that we're seeing a lot of businesses work on at the moment, and they've got plenty of experts. I think we'll try and dive into a bit more detail with them at a later date.
Okay, so next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.